MOLWENI, SANIBONANI, Anjani. How are you? Are you okay? So, today's guest is Terence Mentor, aka AfroDaddy, and he has a blog about fatherhood and everything fatherhood. And he also recently started a group, like a support group for dads of fathers in South Africa, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Today we speak about fatherhood and sex education, and masculinity and misogyny. So, I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you for watching. My name is Keisha Lee, and I'm your host for Take It Off.
I vaguely separate AfroDaddy and Terence sometimes, but the two of them
Okay,
merge a lot of
all
the time.
right.
So yeah.
And also I want to talk about, you actually mentioned you're using pronouns in your name, and that is so cool because I'm having a series called Queer Community Conversation, and we speak about the importance of pronouns and the use thereof. That's
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where it costs me literally nothing. Like it costs me nothing to put that there, and it can actually be super meaningful for someone else.
Yeah, that
Just to
is
make it clear that I understand that that pronouns are important,
pronouns.
and also quite frankly, I mean I was thinking about it the other day. I would hate to someone for someone to call me her or she, not
Mm,
because there's anything wrong with being a woman, but that's not what I identify
your
as.
pronouns. There we
So,
go.
and I would just hate it. If I hate that, then other people have a right to hate that too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a small win just to be an ally that literally cost me nothing. So
Yeah, that's very thoughtful. Thank you. So I guess I'm gonna start like jump right into it and ask you to tell us about who you are and what you do.
sure. Well, in this context, my name is AfroDaddy. My real name's Terence Mentor. I'm a dad from Cape Town. I'm a dad to two boys, Liam and Eli. Liam's 7 and he's adopted, and Eli is 5, turning 25. Um, he's a biological child, and I'm a parenting and fatherhood advocate, blogger, vlogger, podcaster. I talk to dads, about parenting to as many people as humanly possible.
Oh, that's great. I like that a lot. Um, so tell me about AfroDaddy, the blog, the blogger, the podcast, and everything. I'd love to know, how did it come about? What happened?
So I very much the same way as this got started, where I became a dad, and after about a year of searching for content online that spoke about parenting and fatherhood to me, by people that look like me and think like I do, and have the same experience as I do, there just wasn't anything, especially in South Africa. There just wasn't
Mhm.
dads online talking about fatherhood. Occasionally you get a sportsman who would do an ad for some nappy company or whatever, and that would be like all the representation that dads got in the parenting space.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm one of those people that's like, well, if no one's talking about it and it should be spoken about, I'm going to talk about it. So I originally started AfroDaddy as a space that's, and then I quickly realized that men at the moment really struggle with that. They really struggle with engaging with the fatherhood and parenting space online.
Mhm.
So it kind of it started to evolve into more of a space where I'm speaking about fatherhood to other people.
Mhm.
So at the moment, something like 85% of my audience across all my platforms are women, because moms and women want to know what dads are thinking, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to help them with that in a big way. But more and more dads are coming on board and saying, no, we need to be, I want people to be talking about my experience. I want to get help. I want to get support and community. And that's where AfroDaddy is really going, is to create spaces for dads to engage with each other, to talk about the difficult things in a space that's safe for
Yeah.
both. Hey, you're back. Sorry.
Right.
It's not saying, no, it's fine. I'm not saying that all dads are great and that we should all be treated amazingly and that we don't have to do better. It's saying to everyone else, please help us do better.
Yeah.
And to dads, it's saying, come on, guys, we can do better. We have an important role to play in this country. Let's take that role seriously and do what we need to do.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Thank you. And I think that is very much needed within South Africa and Africa as a whole, but especially in South Africa because we live here and we can make differences within our communities.
Mhm.
And so I want to ask you firstly, what do you think to you, or just in general, is the difference between being a father and fathering? Because obviously, by virtue of having a child, you become a father. But then just because you're a father doesn't mean you're there to father or are fathering currently. Like, we have lots of people who are fathers who aren't present, who aren't there at the moment. So, what to you is the difference between being a father
Yeah.
and fathering?
So yeah, I think that's a very great separation that you've made there, because there's this the stat that's going around that 2/3 of children in South Africa live with their fathers, and that's misleading because um, they so many of those children have a father figure in their lives. Either it's an uncle or a brother or a grandfather or a neighbor or someone in their life that represents fatherhood to them. And also, so many fathers in this country are forced through our history to be away from their families. We have
Mm.
so much work, so many workers who have to travel,
Yeah.
so many men who have to go away from their homes to get support for their families. Now,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that they're not dads, that they're not fathers, just because they're not able to be physically there. I would
Mhm.
say they're given a hard choice. I could be here and my kids could starve, or I can go work in the mines thousands of kilometers away, and at least my children can survive and potentially thrive. All of those ways, there's so many different ways to look at what is a father and what fathering actually is. So I definitely would say there is that difference. And and biology doesn't make you a dad. Just because you share genetics with the child doesn't mean that you're that child's father. And I can say that as an adoptive dad. Um, you know, uh, I would feel that I am fully Liam's dad. I mean, there's a whole conversation about first families and the rights of first families,
Mhm.
and biological families in the adopted space. That is a whole other conversation. But I am not 20% of Liam's dad just because I'm his adopted dad. I'm 100% his father because I do
Yeah.
things that fathers should be doing. So,
Yeah. I like that. Perhaps I'll get you back on for the adoptive side of things.
yeah.
So I want to note that. Well, I mean, I'm sure in a lot of communities in South Africa, society as a whole in South Africa, mothers do a lot of fathering. It seems like we are very matriarchal. Like, a lot of mothers are the head of the household. They are the father, the brother,
Mhm.
everything to us. Um, do you think that is because of fathers who choose to work thousands of miles away in mines and things like that? Or do you think that fathers sometimes, I want to say fathers like this, because not all of them are fathers.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, why do you think we have this? I want to say pandemic as well of having mothers who are doing the fathering as well.
Yeah. I think that that's a very complex issue. There's a lot of things that feed into that. So, for instance, the gender pay gap, right? If you have a family where you have to choose who's going to do the family care and who's going to go work. Well, obviously the person who can earn more money will go work. We live in a society where men still earn significantly more than women do. So oftentimes, even if a man wants to have an equal part in the home, he doesn't often have a choice. Uh, a- and so often there's an added wave of privilege that gets into this because white homes, the gender pay gap is less. So there's opportunity for more equality in white homes in South Africa. Um, so for instance, there's that whole complex issue. Then there's also the socialized issue that young girls and women are socialized to be nurturing, to take on the emotional labor of the home, to think about, to be thoughtful about what has to happen in a home for the family to get by and thrive and do well. Boys and men generally aren't socialized for that. We tend to say things like, women naturally do this or men naturally do that. And I struggle with saying that because I don't think it's a natural thing. I think it's something that taught and trained into us. So it feels very natural because after 30 years I've been shown this is the way a man is. It's going to be natural for you to do it that way. And it's very hard to break that mold, even in progressive households. So myself and my wife, I'd say we're very progressive. I do my best to not go along gender norms, but we still struggle with that because there's so many years of that kind of training that have to be caught up that sometimes it's actually just easier to align yourself with the gender norm. Like it just makes more sense for us in certain ways to align along gender norms. So there's that complexity too of the fact that we live in a patriarchal society that has assigned certain norms for certain genders. And then there's, you could add into that the fact that for many homes, for many families, the mother wants to be the dominant role. And men, there's a thing called parental alienation that in many cases, and this becomes a hot button issue because often you'll have men's rights activists, which I do not identify as, you'll have them saying, yes, women are taking too much control and we need to support men's rights. I don't think that's happening everywhere, but I do see it happening in many cases where the father potentially wants to be involved. He wants to do his part, but everything he does is wrong. Everything he does gets criticized because I'm the mother, I know better. So from the moment the child arrives, if you're constantly being told as a dad, you're wrong, you don't know what you're doing, I can't trust you with the child, be careful, well, then I'm going to give up. And then, so there's all these layers of complexity. Then you add the complexity of the biological process where the mother, in a biological, when a family becomes, when a child arrives biologically via birth, not by adoption, the mother has a literal physical connection to the child. If she's breastfeeding, she's physically connected. She's the source of life for that being. And it is hard for a dad to break into that. It's hard to go, hey, I'm year two. Yeah, sure. She gave you, you grew inside of her and she gives you all the nutrition you need and everything you need comes from her. But I'm year two and I'm important. For the first 2 years, it's super hard to break through that. So there's all of these complexities that we're fighting against to try and give dads the space to take up their roles and responsibilities correctly, while also helping dads realize that they should be doing that. They should be doing that fight. They should be fighting for that space.
Yeah, I've never thought of the complexities like that before.
Because we kind of want to villainize men, right?
Yeah, that is very true. We just want to jump on the patriarchal wagon and say,
yeah. And the fact is, that's not entirely wrong. Like there are so many of us that have bad stories of our fathers.
Yeah.
But I think we're in a phase now where we need to start having instead of just going, that dad was a bad dad, that man was a bad father, that man was a bad man. We need to start taking that extra step of going, he was bad, he made bad decisions and bad choices, and there needs to be a reckoning for that for him. But we also need to take a step of asking why. Why did he get to that point? How did he get to that point? And not for him. We need to do that for the next generation of fathers, as men, and it's so easy to make men as a group just evil, just innately evil, that it's very difficult for me as a man to even ask the question and put my hand up and say, wait, but can we figure out why? It's critical for me. I have 2 boys. I need to figure out what I can do to make sure they don't turn out like that. So, these are big questions.
The why, I think, is really important in all of this. Sorry for the background noise.
No, of course.
I want to then ask you, right? So as a parent or you have young children, but I'm sure they'll go to school the next 2 years. How did you feel, reading about it when Department of Basic Education brought in the new curriculum about sex education. A lot of parents were outraged and they were going crazy. What did you feel?
I feel that schools have a level of authority where there are a lot of places. These are the kind of things that schools need to be teaching from a everyone has the same level, an equalized level. I do think parents have a responsibility for when the child comes home and says, "Hey, I had a sex education class," in the way that you would engage with a child when they have a maths lesson or when they have geography or English. You're not going to just be like, "Yeah, whatever, cool." You're gonna sit down with them and you're gonna work through the things that they're struggling with. I think it's critical that they have those conversations in a school context. Also, that they know that it's not the secret hidden thing
Yeah.
that you can only talk. You can only talk about it in whispers in your home with the doors closed and the phone off the hook. Um, it's a thing that no, we can talk about this publicly in these ways, and this is the proper way to speak about sex in a public space. Great. Now go home, and if you have any real difficult questions that you're confused by, go speak to your parents, and your parents should also be able to talk to you about that as well. So I don't think it should be an either or. It has to be both.
I like that a lot. Like the parents should also facilitate the conversation. So I want to know then, with facilitating this conversation, with navigating how they say the talk, is there an appropriate age to perhaps begin the conversation so that it is a continuous process of openness and conversation with the child and parent? Or is there a particular age, like say 13, 16, and we sit down and talk about the birds and the bees? Because that's what we've known.
Yeah, I think by the time they're teenagers, definitely by then. Like I think that might be too late, quite frankly. Like you need to get in there earlier. The way we've kind of navigated this is that every child is different and every child has an emotional level of handling certain topics. The best advice we got is to just answer the questions that they have as honestly as possible. So but also don't answer the question that they're not answering, because sometimes we hear what they're asking and we're thinking 5 steps ahead, and we're like, oh no, they're not even asking about actual sex. They're just wanting to know, how do babies get fed inside the mommy's tummy? Okay, well then we can talk about the fact that there's this thing called a womb, and how and basically how that works. We're very open to ask those questions. When those questions come up, you need to. It's good to have thought through some of the answers yourself, so you're not taken by surprise. Because I think also a lot of the training about how we talk about sex and how we talk about our bodies, a lot of it is nonverbal. So when the child asks a question, if you're like, and you're biting your nails and you're freaking out, before you even said anything, you're already telling the child, this is a difficult conversation. This is something that's awkward and uncomfortable. But if you can maybe calm your own nerves a bit beforehand, and this is where preparation comes in. Okay, so when the child asks about sex, what are we going to say? How are we going to say it? I think also one of the worst things you can do is go to tell your child to speak to the other parent. Both parents, it can't be one parent's responsibility. Both parents need to be okay with talking about it. It has to be a team effort. It has to be a team effort. And you have to know what you think and feel and believe about sex, because obviously it's not just how does sex work or what is sex for. There's a whole range of issues around it that is informed by your personal beliefs, is informed by your own, and a lot of it might actually be, I believe this one thing, but actually I can't justify that, and I need to work through that before I speak to my child. So a lot of parenting is that. A lot of parenting is analyzing your own beliefs and realizing that you actually are wrong before the child asks the question.
Yeah, that is. I think that kind of leads into my next question of, do you remember what your sex education was like? And would you be passing that on or using any information about it to your children? Would you at all use what you were taught?
So I first kind of learned about sex through friends talking about it at junior school and lessons at junior school. Um, it wasn't something that was really brought up in the home. You know, we're a little bit more traditionally South African conservative colored family. Um, so I wouldn't want my child's first understanding of what sex is to come from their 10-year-old friend. Like
Yeah.
that's not a great source of information. So um I definitely, and I think part of the reason why I'm happy that schools are having these kinds of open conversations in the classrooms, because that's where I learned from the real fundamentals of what it, like the mechanics of it, so to speak. And that's where I think it's very important to have those conversations. But again, I would want I would want my sons to feel that they can come and talk to me about it, and that I would be able to guide them in that conversation and help them have an appropriate conversation about it. Uh, yeah.
So then, I mean, as a father, how would you, or how, like, yeah, I think as a father is the first part of this, is the main part of this. Obviously, I think early on you mentioned that sometimes we go and say, go and ask the other parent in terms
Mm,
of like anatomy or whatever. So how would you navigate like telling your child or explaining to them at a particular age they'll start having erections when they wake up because you have boys. So we're speaking
mm.
about men. This is the just for men segment. When boys wake up with erections, how do you then handle conversations like that with about body parts about gender? Because sometimes when children are young, they experience or they experiment with different things. How do you then approach those conversations or those questions or those answers as a dad, as the father in the house?
So I think it starts early on with letting your child know that any question is there's no question that's off the table, that there's nothing that they can't talk to you about, that they won't get in trouble or they won't be shamed by asking these questions. So from now, even now, you know, occasionally, you know, my boys are still young, so we still occasionally shower, or like, you know, they'll be in the bath together, and they'll have a question about their bodies, and I will I will answer that question honestly. I will explain to them exactly what is going on, so they know that they have ownership over their own bodies, that there's nothing wrong with their bodies. There's nothing to be ashamed of when it comes to their bodies. That everything that happens to them is natural, and they you know, I'm trying to avoid having like too personal an answer here, because you know I have to protect my
Mm-hmm.
family. But a lot of it is them, you know, looking at things and saying, wait, I don't understand why things are like, you know, Dad, why do you have hair under your arms, or why do you have facial hair? And a lot of that is like, okay, well, as you get, you know, so those are sometimes easier ways of
Mm-hmm.
broaching the idea that your bodies change over time. So they know that as they get older, they're going to get hair in different places that they're not used
Mm-hmm.
to. That older boys, you know, they're going to start sweating, and their sweat's going to smell different. And there are these changes that happen, and that they mustn't be scared of those changes. And that I'm here, I've gone through all of it too. I've understood what's going on, and I will help them through it. Um, I want them to see me as their ally in these changes, and that I'm someone who has gone through it, and I'm their guide, and I will help them get through it, and they can trust me. That starts with, again, early on, not being shy of the you know, because when they're really young, when they're just learning to talk, they say things like, you know, what's that, and why is my penis like this, but my friends or so whatever. They ask these kind of, you know, strange things,
Yeah.
and that's when you have to just that's when you're showing them how to respond to these kinds of moments. So
Yeah. Yeah, that is very true. So, I want to ask you, right? So, obviously, during my research for my podcast, I've learned that sex is, or rather, yeah, our sex sometimes, or our definitions of sex, or sex educations, whether it be at home or at school, are passed down to us, be it directly or indirectly from our parents or from our homes. And unless we break that generational cycle of getting the same information and passing it to our children, um, so sorry.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, how do we, or how would you break that? I mean, would you firstly agree that yes, it is passed down and we get our sex education from our parents, and indirectly, whatever they got, we'll get. And then we'll hopefully not pass that on to our children. That is true. And then also, how do you think we should break that cycle?
So yeah, I 100% agree, and I think even more than just the information, the tone and the feeling around conversations of sex and what sex is about, the like I was saying earlier, like the unspoken
Yeah.
nonverbal cues
Mm-hmm.
is even more deeper seated in us, and
Yes.
it's a lot easier to pass it on unknowingly to
Mm-hmm.
your children. I do that all the time with so many different things where I'll say something and I sound just like my dad, and I don't know where that came from. I didn't realize that was in me, but it was in me somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only real way to break that is you have to do the work of investigating and questioning your own thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not that it doesn't necessarily mean that everything you think and feel is wrong, but you have to do the work of thinking to yourself, okay, wait, I feel uncomfortable in this space, or I feel uncomfortable with this conversation, or I feel uncomfortable with this idea. Why is
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah.
What is going on there? Is there a thing that did something happen that's making me feel
Mm.
uncomfortable? Is there something that's maybe someone said, or was it a way that is this from my parents, and is it appropriate to feel uncomfortable in this conversation? Like, I don't think we have to feel comfortable with everything all the time. We're
Mm-hmm.
not all the same when it comes to this. um, and if you decide that actually, wait, the way I feel might not be the appropriate way to respond to this particular
Mm-hmm.
idea or topic, then you have to do the work of educating yourself into why, or at least what the appropriate response should be. The before we started recording, you mentioned that in my Zoom bio, there's my name and then there's my pronouns, he and him. um, a few years ago, I would have been like, "Ugh, no, man! Like, there's he and him, and he and her and she, and they must just everyone must just be happy with what I call them."
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't happy with that because I knew that wasn't. I had to investigate and go, wait, why am I feeling so uncomfortable with calling someone who I would consider she? Why is it so hard for me to say him? Like, why is that so hard?
Yeah.
And I had to do that work of educating myself, of understanding, of getting a better understanding of what transgendered and non-binary people are saying, and people and smarter people who have been going through this, who have thought about this more than I have. I need to
Mm-hmm.
go and investigate and learn from them and make the changes. So it does, breaking that cycle and breaking the generational learning being passed
Yeah.
down does require energy from you. um,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and that's why we have podcasts like this, because this is the work that needs to be done.
Yep, that is very true. Um, so I want to kind of mention that obviously we know that a lot of children, unfortunately, not just in South Africa and Africa, like the world at large, grew up without dads for various reasons, unknown
Mm,
and maybe known to us. So I know that your group, I think, to me is really important, and as well as I know that there's this space in America called Dad Gang or something like that. I'm not sure
yep,
what it's called. And
yep.
those are the only two things that I've seen that focus on fatherhood. Like there's nothing else that I've seen on the internet so far that is quite similar. So I want to say, having formed these groups and having your blog and things, what is a father's role? What is your role as a father and fatherhood in society at large? Because obviously it's very
Mm.
important. And a lot of people grew up without this particular role. How important is that role to society?
So the research, the little bit of research that has come through about fatherhood is so clear that children who grow up two two adult carers, people who, and I want to be very clear, because it becomes a bit hazy. You don't want to say mom and dad because there's all variations of what that looks like in different families.
Yeah.
but but children who grow up with two adults who show them absolute care and love and nourishment, they they are less likely to fall into crime, less
Mm.
likely to fall victim of any sort of addiction, like significantly less likely to fall into any sort of addiction. Girls and young women are less likely to become pregnant as teenagers. They're more likely to get to finish high school and go on to get a degree. They're more likely to be employed, gainfully employed, and they're more likely to be active members in society. So those are in general in our society. That's the importance that fathers play. I mean, that's the stabilizing role that fathers play. There's so many social ills that if we were able to bring a supportive role for fathers, that there's a lot of those inputs that would make a difference, where the next generation have the support they need to thrive, and break the cycle of all those terrible things, break the cycle of addiction, break the cycle of crime, break the cycle of teenage pregnancy that puts young girls and women at such a major disadvantage over boys. That starts to get rectified by having active fathers in these homes.
Yes, that is very true. And I wish it weren't like that, but it is what it is. So, I'd like to move on to the misogyny and masculinity part of things. So, and how fitting you have two boys. So I want to speak about masculinity, I guess. And I want to say that I think a lot of people, a lot of boys and men think that by virtue of having a penis, that being masculine automatically puts you on the top of whatever hierarchy it is, food chain or whatever it is. And how do we dispel that? That by having a penis, it doesn't mean anything. Having a vagina, having a vulva, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't put you on top of anybody or anyone. How do we dispel that?
So a lot of it is with language from at a young age. You know, when my boys go, oh, don't be like, you're such a girl. You know, there's a lot of, you know, both my wife and I like rushed down. Like, wait a second. Firstly, he's not a girl. He's a boy. He you know, he's a boy, and just because he is upset about this thing doesn't mean he's a girl. Secondly, being a girl's great. Your mom's a girl. Your grandmother's a girl. There are girls all over the place, and we're so lucky that girls exist. And calling someone a girl isn't an insult, and you shouldn't use it as an insult. So helping kids understand that, I think, is the first thing. And I do like the fact that you're separating masculinity from misogyny, because I think they've been so intertwined for so long because of men. Like, I want to make it clear, like, this isn't other people making it seem like being masculine is right and not being masculine is wrong. Men have done that, exactly what you're saying, where it's like, you know, there was the Vintook ads for years, like, real men don't drink pink drinks. Like, what absolute nonsense and crap are you talking? You know, the idea that if you're not masculine, you're not a man. That's a problem. And B, that masculine is better is a problem. So I often tell, you know, when I talk to people about this, I'm like, if you want to be the shorts and pluckies wearing, beer drinking, burry braai making, watching rugby, oak bra, stereotypical South African guy, fantastic. There's nothing wrong with with enjoying those things. It's when you think that by being those things, you are naturally superior to anyone else who isn't those things. When you dismiss men who aren't like that, when you dismiss women who aren't like that, or other genders who aren't like that, who don't identify or enjoy those things or behave in those ways, that's when you become a problem. That's when you become toxic. You know, if you're the kind of guy who can love having a beer at a braai, and when another man comes in who doesn't want to be near the fire and has a pink drink in his hand, and doesn't want to be near the fire and wants to talk about non-rugby stuff, if you can still welcome that man in and treat that man as an equal, that's when you've separated your masculinity from misogyny. But I don't think we've got to a point where the vast majority of men have been able to make that distinction.
Separate that. That's true.
You know, we still have men using sissy or morphy as a pejorative. We're still using it like, oh, stop being such a woman, man. Stop being such a girl.
Mm-hmm.
So I've tried very hard to make sure that I've never used the term man up or
Mm-hmm.
don't be such a girl to my boys even when they do need to toughen up. I might say, okay, my boyki, you need to like, you've cried enough now. It's time to deal with this in a big boy way or in a big kid way. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying very hard to separate
Yeah.
developing and being mature and being strong with
Mm-hmm.
being a man, because I want them to know that you can be strong and not masculine.
Yep.
So again, like I said, with all these things, it all starts early on. You break that cycle with boys when they're born, and you work through.
Then what about misogyny, right? Obviously, it is it is something we see, like you mentioned earlier on, the gender pay gap that is already another form of misogyny. And having women do tasks, just or thinking women can only be relegated to those particular tasks because they are women, and by virtue of them having a vulva, they are only allowed to do those things like that. And a lot of men in society, unfortunately, even in 2020, still think that way. It is the most bizarre thing ever. How do fathers then break those things, those cycles of thoughts, those ideologies that a man does this and that, and a woman is only good for those five things in the world?
Yeah. Well, I think firstly, if the woman is doing those things that we've relegated them to do, um, firstly, we can make sure that we don't make it seem like those things aren't worthwhile. Traditionally not feminist, feminine tasks
Mm-hmm.
of emotional care, the emotional labor of the home, all of
Mm-hmm.
those things are valuable. The unpaid work and
Yeah.
unpaid labor that women have done and continue to do is incredibly valuable. And we also need to make sure that it's not just about women doing traditionally men's work. That
Mm-hmm.
is part of it, and making the playing field open and fair across genders is part of it. But if you are a stay-at-home mom or a nurse or a teacher or those things that women have traditionally been designated,
Mm-hmm.
those are valuable, those are worthwhile, and we need to be giving you the credit. I mean, we should be paying you more, but in the lack of the physical finances, we should at the
Mm-hmm.
very least be like acknowledging that those things are critical and
Yeah.
valuable. So there's that, and then the second thing is you got to get yourself doing it as the dad.
Mm-hmm.
You have to show your kids that dads do the laundry, they cook, they give you hugs and kindness when you're feeling sore,
Yeah.
when you're scared. They're the ones who are giving you the emotional, all those things that all the and I use this very, very broadly, very big quotes, all the soft things that
Mm-hmm.
moms do, you need to show your children that men do that too, and that men are
Yeah.
capable of doing that. And that's one of those things where you might not feel comfortable. Like, in all honesty, I still don't feel comfortable with those things, but I
Mm-hmm.
have to swallow that and I have to put that aside because I want my boys to know that they can be comforted by their dad, that they can experience softness and grace and emotional support from their father,
Mm-hmm.
that they can get nourishment from their dad. So something as simple as being the person to do the grocery shopping and plan the meals and being
Mm-hmm.
part of that process is important.
Yeah.
um yeah, so those are two big ways that you potentially break that misogynistic cycles.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, obviously, as children, we inherit the masculinity and the misogyny thing from growing up in a home where we see or we notice how mom and dad treat each other or how dad treats the mother. And obviously, with that, we grow up and go into the world with these ideas that it's okay to treat mom like that because my father did it or whatever else. So I only do this work in the house. I'm only doing this because my father said, or my father does that in the house. So yeah, I think because children are so impressionable, they pick up a lot of these things from parents. So how then do you navigate, right? Your child going into the world, going to school, having friends, peers who speak about the most bizarre things, and still trying to say, hey, that, or then how do we, I don't want to say bully children, but how do we fortify is coming to my mind for some reason, them against seeing that in the real world or outside the house. We are still going to see those things. How do we then influence them and say, hey, come back to what we taught you at home? Because obviously teaching and learning is very important and starts at home before you send them off to school to have education. So how do we then reel them back to those things?
So especially now that they're going to big school and encountering all sorts of different people, which is great. I love the fact that they are encountering people who think and behave differently to them. I think that gives them a better understanding of the world. But ultimately, they know that there are a set of rules and behaviors in our home, in our family, in our home. There's a way we behave, and there's a reason for those things. So as they get older, we explain to them, this is why dad speaks to your mom this way. This is why we don't hit like that, or we don't say these words. And when they say those words, we remind them why. And if they say, oh, but my friend at school says that, we say, fine, that's for his family to work out. In our family, this is the way we behave, and this is why we behave that way. If you want to talk to your friend about that, you go ahead, go and talk to your friend about that. But this is, so because it is a fine line, because we don't want our kids to be judgy and judgmental of other families and the way other families do things, right? We don't want them to like walk around school and say, oh no, the way you guys do, like, that's wrong and your family's wrong for thinking that. We don't want to have those kids. But we do want them to be firm in their own understanding of the world. And again, that comes from being the first people to inform them of that. I think it's one of those things where often the first person into the brain, the first thought into the brain is the thing that sticks the most, and it's the hardest to get out. So we want to make sure that as a family, as parents, we've made it clear how we expect them to behave. So that when they do come back with, oh, my friend, he gets to sit in the front seat of his car, we can say, okay, well, we don't think that's a good idea. We think that's unsafe. And for us, we you guys sit at the back in your booster seats where it's safe, and we all strap in, we all do it. And that's how we do it. And we do about being the first people to establish the foundations in your own home.
I like that. I like that a lot. So I'd love to talk more about the group you recently started with South African dads. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and it's so needed. It is needed in our society. I literally told my uncle about it last night, and I was like, "Go and join it," because he's a father to a teenage boy, and I think that fathers, they really do need that support on the side, because I don't know, men. I mean, obviously, I've always known for a man not to share things. They don't talk out about stuff that affect them. So at least they'd have a place where, hopefully, if not now, but soon, one day, willingly, they will share their inner thoughts and things like that. I want to know how is this group structured? What is it going to do for men in South Africa, for fathers in South Africa?
So look, men are at a disadvantage when it comes to these kinds of groups. There are hundreds of these kinds of groups all across the country for moms and for women. Women have been, so things that women, the two ways that women are ahead of us when it comes to this is that they understand that there's real value in community. Community gets you through a lot of hard stuff. The second thing is that they know how to be in a community. They know what it takes to engage in these conversations. They know how to support each other. They know how to call each other out on stuff. I'm not saying it always works perfectly. Women are humans too, obviously. But on the whole, they know how to start these groups. They know how to keep these groups. And all these groups, a lot of these groups start very informally. It's 8 or 9 women in a WhatsApp group who happen to be friends, and they're talking about stuff that their husbands would never be talking about with each other around the bride. So the first thing this group is trying to do is to educate fathers about why groups like this are important for dads. That's the first step. The second step is to educate fathers about how to be in a group like this. So there's a lot of like rules. There's a lot of suggestions of how to engage with each other. There's many there's many subgroups. Is, we try to keep the topics very separated out so that we know.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no. In the general group, we talk about fatherhood. If you want to go talk about sports, go to the sports section, go chat there, because I want to make sure that we don't let fathers do what dads traditionally do, which is talk about anything but fatherhood, right? I'm exactly the same. I will gladly talk about, the details of Liverpool's, attacking strategy to my friend who's a dad, then talk about, hey, like, how's your week been with the kids? I,
Yeah.
and this is what I do. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been talking about father for 5 years, and I still struggle to do that with my friends.
Wow.
Whereas my wife daily is speaking to her friends about her experience of
Totally.
motherhood.
No.
So I'm really trying to get this group to be the space that I need.
Mm.
Actually, it's a bit selfish because I know I need this. So I'm trying to get a space that I know myself and other dads need to get the training to potentially go out and form a bunch of
Mm.
these groups themselves wherever they are.
Yeah.
Hopefully that works out. It's very much in a new phase. There's been a lot of very encouraging movement. I started with just me in the group. I now have 50 dads, which is 50 more than I anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
And there's regular dads chatting in there, giving advice, giving support,
That's
laughing with each
amazing.
other, you know, empathizing and sympathizing with each other when times are tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly what I was hoping. Like my highest expectations have been matched by the dads in the group, which is great, right? Because again, this is sorry, I can go off. I'll keep it short.
Okay.
The great thing is that there is this narrative, like I was saying earlier, that dads are evil, that men are evil, that men are villains.
Yeah.
And here I have 50 dads who are doing everything in their power to change that narrative,
Yeah.
not just for everyone else, right? Not just for like, oh, we want women to like us, but for
Mm.
other dads. Other
Yeah.
dads might be feeling like, oh, wait a second, maybe I am the villain, maybe I am bad. And
Mm.
then we have this group of dads coming in and saying, no, you're not. You don't have to be. You don't have to
Mm.
be a bad dad. You don't have to behave in these ways. There's 50 of us who all give a damn. Come and join us. Be part of the people that give a damn, and we'll
Yeah.
help each other. So it's very encouraging for me, and I think it's encouraging for the other dads too.
Yeah, I definitely think it is. And I wish you growth in everything in terms of the group. Um,
Thank you.
I would like to ask how would you then use your platform in dispelling these misogynistic ideologies of women and also then separating masculinity and misogyny?
Well, I talk about it a lot to a point where I probably lose a lot of followers. Um, I make sure that AfroDaddy is an overtly feminist space. I hesitate to call myself a feminist because I feel like that's a badge I need to be given by someone else versus taking it myself. And I know that like the one man you have to be most worried about is the man who calls himself a feminist. So I don't want to do that. But definitely AfroDaddy as a space has feminist ideals. I think fatherhood is a feminist issue, actually.
Mm.
If you want to create equality in homes, we need dads to be engaged. So like for me, it is a feminist issue, and I make it very clear in my conversations, um, and and I try to be balanced as well. I try to also point out how difficult parenting can be for dads. So I think that helps because I think men look at me and go, "Oh, wait a second, he's not just trying to be, he's not trying to get women to like him. He's not trying to just bash us and look like the good guy. He's our ally too. I'm both men and I'm fathers and mothers ally. I'm going, it is better for all of us if dads are engaged. It's hard right now for dads to be engaged. Let's understand that and let's work out ways to help dads. So dads go, oh wait, he's not trying to bash us, he's trying to help us.
Yeah.
um and so which is not something I think women need to do, right? Like, I want to make
Mm.
it clear, like, I don't think it's a woman's job to be a bridge to bring potentially difficult men across to non-misogynistic and towards feminist ideals. That's not a woman's job. It should actually be men's jobs. So I'm trying to do that job as best I can.
I love that. Thank you very much. Do you think society will be, I don't know, accepting and willing to what is this? to 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 take in this change, to separate, but also to dispel the whole misogynistic and toxic masculinity
Mm.
going forward, because obviously every year there are new things, there are new developments, there are improvements to technology and medicine and all of these things, but still those core things of misogyny and toxic masculinity, they seem to stay the same. And sometimes, yes, there are changes or we see changes, but I feel like every time when I scroll in my newsfeed and I see the first woman to be head of something bank over in a long time, or first black female to do anything, and I'm just like, are we still, it's 2020, or why are we still stuck in it's the first woman, it's the first this, it's the how, why are we still there? Do you think it will take us another 50 years to get to a point where oh, it's a woman being appointed as the CEO?
Having I don't know. I know there's two things I do know. I know that we are not where we should be when it comes to um, both race and gender and sex relations. We're nowhere near where we should be.
Mm.
We're probably 50 years behind where we should be. Um, I don't know if we will ever get to a point where we reach equality in on all of these spaces.
Mm.
But I do know that we'll never get there if people like you and I don't try. So I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime. But what I can do is set my boys up to see it in their lifetime. There are ways that I can be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Um, and that's just kind of my goal, actually. I don't want to, I don't feel like I have the ability or power to fix the problem, but at the very least, I can make sure that I'm not part of it. So that's my goal. Just not be part of the problem and make sure that my children will not be part of the problem as well.
Thank you. I like that. Me and my children aren't part of the problem. So this episode is part of a just for men series. I want to try and focus on men for a bit. So I want to ask you, in terms of what we've spoken about, and also considering toxic masculinity and also sex education, what advice would you give for men, young, old, and those who are about to be fathers and those who are fathers, on navigating parenthood, sex education, all of these topics that go in between?
I think the first thing I would suggest is get help. You don't have to, so much of what men do, it feels like we have to do this alone.
Mm.
So find a support group, find a therapist, find someone who's an expert in the field, and talk to them. People want to help men. There are lots of people like myself who are desperately wanting to help men. So I think shedding your fear of getting help, shedding the fear of vulnerability is the first step, because then you can get the help you need. Secondly, um, self-awareness goes a long way as well. Asking yourself, why do I feel this way about this thing? Why do I respond to certain inputs the way I do? Is it an appropriate response? Why am I getting angry? Why do I disregard some people? Once you start doing that, you start to realize that a lot of what we do actually isn't logical or fair or appropriate. And that's an ongoing work that you have to do, where you're doing a lot of self-analysis and being self-aware to make yourself, to improve, to make yourself better. And often you do feel better. It might suck at first to go, oh, wait a second, I acted in a really trash way, but at least you could stop acting in a trash way because you now know. So yeah, I would strongly suggest get help and get self-aware. It's probably the two best ways to help.
Thank you so very much. So, could you tell my listeners perhaps where we can find AfroDaddy and the support group that you started and on all of those things?
Yeah, sure. You can find AfroDaddy right behind you. No, just kidding. You can find him on the website, which is afrodaddyonline.com. That's where all the AfroDaddy content, the podcasts and the blogs and the vlogs that I make go. You can also find me on Instagram. AfroDaddy CT is the place for Instagram. And then if you are a dad and you want to join a dad's group, we use a service called Discord. There's a Discord server that you can find the link to. Otherwise, chat to me and we can get you daddyct@gmail.com and get you this.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me this morning for this.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.